In a small, close-knit Catholic community, St. Michael's Church stood proudly, serving as a gathering place for parishioners. Father Andrew Greene, the beloved priest, was known for his kindness and dedication. He had spent over 10 years guiding his congregation with warm sermons and compassionate care. His deep brown eyes and gentle demeanor made him a comforting presence in the lives of those around him. Clara Greene, Andrew's wife, was admired for her beauty and tireless charity work. Clara organized food drives, visited the sick, and ran youth programs at the church. With her warm smile and kind heart, together, Andrew and Clara were seen as the perfect couple, their lives centered around faith and service. Everything changed when Isabelle Clark, Clara's younger sister, moved to the area after a difficult divorce. Isabelle, in her early 30s, was vibrant and charming, but she struggled with feelings of loneliness. Isabelle Clark moved into her sister Clara's home, seeking solace after her difficult divorce. The pain of her failed marriage weighed heavily on her heart, and the transition to a new community felt daunting. Clara, ever supportive, encouraged Isabelle to attend church services and community events, hoping to lift her sister's spirits. However, it was the quiet moments with Father Andrew that provided the comfort she desperately needed. Andrew had a unique ability to listen, and his compassionate nature drew Isabelle in like a moth to a flame. During their conversations, he offered her guidance, helping her navigate her grief and sense of loss. As days turned into weeks, Isabelle found herself confiding in Andrew about her struggles, sharing her feelings of inadequacy and heartache. Andrew, in turn, shared his own burdens, his commitment to the church, the pressures of being a priest, and the expectations placed upon him. Their conversations gradually deepened, evolving from simple discussions to heartfelt confessions. Each exchange brought a sense of connection that both found increasingly difficult to ignore. The nights grew longer as Isabelle and Andrew spent more time together after Clara went to bed. They would sit on the porch, wrapped in blankets, sharing stories of their pasts, dreams, and fears. With every shared laugh, every empathetic nod, an emotional vulnerability blossomed between them. They talked about everything, from family memories to their hopes for the future, creating a bond that felt special yet dangerously close to crossing a line. As their friendship deepened, they both began to sense an unspoken tension in the air. Their casual touches lingered longer than necessary. Their laughter became more intimate. The line between friendship and something more blurred with each passing moment. Andrew found himself increasingly drawn to Isabelle's spirit, her laughter, and the way her eyes lit up when she spoke about her passions. Likewise, Isabelle felt an undeniable attraction to Andrew's strength and kindness. The chemistry was palpable, and each shared moment left them both breathless, caught in a whirlwind of emotions they struggled to suppress. One fateful evening, after a particularly long day of emotional conversations, Andrew and Isabelle found themselves alone in the living room, the dim light casting shadows on their faces. Clara had gone out for a church meeting, leaving them in the silence that hung thick with tension. The vulnerability they had shared suddenly felt electric, and as they talked, their eyes locked, each aware of the growing pull between them. In that moment, they lost sight of their boundaries. A gentle brush of hands turned into an intense gaze, and before they could process what was happening, they leaned in closer. The kiss that followed was both a release and a catalyst, igniting a passion neither of them had anticipated. In a whirlwind of desire and confusion, they succumbed to their feelings, crossing a line that would change everything. What had begun as a supportive relationship turned into a passionate secret affair. They found themselves swept up in a world of stolen moments and hushed whispers, meeting in the shadows of their lives to share their love, despite the guilt that gnawed at their hearts. Both Andrew and Isabelle were acutely aware of the consequences of their actions, yet they felt powerless to stop the tide of emotions that had overtaken them. Each encounter deepened their connection, but with it came the knowledge that their love was forbidden, setting the stage for inevitable tragedy. As the weeks passed, Clara began to sense a shift in her marriage. The warmth and closeness she once shared with Andrew started to fade, replaced by an unsettling distance. He was often preoccupied, lost in thought, and his usual attentiveness seemed to vanish. What troubled Clara the most were the late-night absences, when Andrew would say he needed to catch up on work at the church. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. During dinner, Clara would watch Andrew push his food around on his plate, his mind clearly elsewhere. The conversations that once flowed easily between them became strained and short. He was frequently late coming home, often making excuses about meeting with parishioners or preparing for upcoming sermons. Clara's heart sank with each passing day, her instincts whispering that he was hiding something from her. One afternoon, while cleaning their home, Clara stumbled upon Andrew's phone lying on the kitchen counter. It buzzed with notifications, and curiosity pulled her closer. She hesitated, but then picked it up, glancing at the screen. A message popped up from an unknown number, reading, "Can't wait to see you tonight. I miss you." Clara's breath hitched in her throat as her heart raced. Who could be texting her husband like this? Despite her better judgment, Clara felt compelled to explore further. She opened Andrew's messaging app and was met with a thread of messages between him and Isabelle. With every line she read, her heart shattered a little more. They exchanged flirty texts, filled with heart emojis and longing declarations. The truth struck her like a thunderbolt. Her husband was having an affair with her sister. Devastated, Claire dropped the phone, her mind racing with disbelief and betrayal. How could Andrew do this to her? They had built a life based on love and trust, and now it felt like everything was crumbling around her. The thought of confronting Andrew was terrifying, yet she knew she couldn't let this betrayal go unanswered. After a long, sleepless night, Clara sat on the edge of their bed, her heart heavy with anguish. She contemplated leaving Andrew, wondering if she could ever trust him again. The idea of packing her bags and walking away from their life together was daunting. But deep down, Claire felt that confronting him was necessary. She needed to hear the truth from his lips and understand how he could betray their vows so completely. The following evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Clara steeled herself for the confrontation. She had decided to invite Andrew to sit down and talk, hoping for an honest discussion. When he walked through the door, she could see the weariness etched on his face, but Claire felt a fierce resolve rising within her. She was ready to confront the man she loved, a man who had shattered her trust in the most painful way possible. The air in the Greene household grew thick with tension as Clara began to piece together the truth. Over the weeks, subtle signs had raised her suspicions: late nights at the church, whispered phone calls, and the uneasy glances exchanged between Andrew and Isabelle. It all culminated one stormy evening when Clara found a series of intimate text messages on Andrew's phone, messages that left no room for doubt about the affair between her husband and her sister. Heart racing and emotions swirling, Clara confronted Andrew and Isabelle in the living room, the flickering candlelight casting shadows on their faces. Her voice trembled with hurt and anger as she demanded answers. Andrew's expression shifted from surprise to guilt, his shoulders sagging as he faced the devastating consequences of his actions. "Why, Andrew? How could you do this to me?" Clara's voice cracked, tears welling in her eyes. "And you, Isabelle, I took you in when you needed help." Andrew, unable to meet Clara's gaze, fumbled for words. "Clara, I'm so sorry. I never meant for this to happen. I love you, but I got lost in everything. This confession hung heavy in the air, revealing the internal struggle he faced between his devotion to Clara and his growing feelings for Isabelle. Isabelle, standing beside him, looked torn between remorse and fear. "I didn't want this either, Clara. I thought we could find a way to make it work without hurting anyone." Her voice was barely above a whisper, but her eyes revealed a flicker of defiance. Clara's heart pounded with fury, her mind racing. The betrayal felt like a knife twisting in her gut. Humiliated and devastated, she realized she could no longer remain silent. "You think this can just be swept under the rug? I can't allow this betrayal to ruin my life. You both need to be held accountable for what you've done." That night, as Clara lay awake, a plan formed in her mind, a desperate decision fueled by anger and a need for justice. She resolved to expose Andrew's betrayal to the parish and community leaders, believing that only by shining a light on their affair could she reclaim her dignity. The thought of revealing Andrew's infidelity sent chills down her spine, but she felt that it was the only way to confront the emotional devastation she had suffered. Meanwhile, in the dark corners of their shared guilt, Andrew and Isabelle were gripped by panic. The thought of Clara revealing their affair was a nightmare they couldn't bear to imagine. The gravity of their actions weighed heavily on them as they faced the potential fallout. Andrew's mind raced as he contemplated the loss of his position as a priest, the trust of his congregation, and the life he had built with Clara. He knew the parish would not easily forgive such a scandal, and the shame would forever tarnish his reputation. "Isabelle, we can't let her do this. I can't lose everything," he said, his voice trembling with desperation. Isabelle, feeling the pressure close in around her, nodded anxiously. "What if she goes to the bishop? Could ruin us both," she replied, her voice laced with fear. The reality of their choices hit them like a wave, leaving them feeling trapped in a web of their own making. In the days that followed, Clara's decision loomed over the household like a dark cloud, each moment heavy with unspoken tension. As the confrontation settled into their hearts, a sense of impending doom filled the air, threatening to unravel their lives and relationships in a way they could never have predicted. The stage was set for a devastating conclusion, as the once perfect life they had built began to crumble under the weight of their secrets. As Father Andrew Greene and Isabelle Clark became increasingly entangled in their illicit affair, the weight of their secret began to take a toll on their lives. Clara's suspicions were mounting, and both Andrew and Isabelle could feel the walls closing in around them. A sense of desperation took hold, pushing them to the brink of a dangerous decision. One evening, after a particularly heated argument between the two, they sat in silence, the tension palpable in the dimly lit room. Their conversations had shifted from longing whispers to frantic discussions about the impending threat Claire posed to their lives. Andrew's mind raced with thoughts of what would happen if Claire discovered the truth. "She'll destroy everything," he muttered, his hands trembling as he clenched them into fists. Isabelle, equally panicked, nodded in agreement. "We can't let her ruin us. We have to do something." In that moment of heated fear, they devised a rash plan to silence Clara. They both knew that her exposure of their affair would not only tarnish Andrew's reputation as a priest, but also jeopardize Isabelle's standing in the community. The idea of losing everything, his vocation, his marriage, and the life he had built, was unbearable. Driven by their mounting desperation, they resolved to eliminate the threat Clara posed once and for all. Days later, Andrew approached Clara under the guise of wanting to reconcile. He suggested they take a drive to a secluded spot by the river where they could talk away from the distractions of the community. Clara, eager to mend their relationship and unaware of the sinister intentions behind his proposal, readily agreed. That night, she dressed in her favorite sweater, her mind filled with hope for a peaceful resolution. As they drove along the dark, winding roads, Andrew's heart raced with anxiety. He glanced at Isabelle, who was nervously fidgeting in the passenger seat. The tension between them was electric. Upon reaching the isolated location, Andrew parked the car under the moonlight, the soft glow casting eerie shadows around them. They stepped out into the cool night air, and Clara smiled, eager to bridge the gap in their marriage. But the atmosphere was heavy with unspoken intentions, and Andrew and Isabelle exchanged glances filled with dread and determination. As Clara began to voice her hopes for their relationship, Andrew and Isabelle suddenly shifted the conversation toward Clara's suspicions about Isabelle's presence in their lives. Clara's expression changed from hopeful to defensive, her instincts kicking in as she sensed the tension. "What's going on? Why are you both acting so strange?" she asked, her heart racing. Before Clara could grasp the gravity of the situation, Andrew and Isabelle lunged at her in a tragic and horrifying escalation. In a fit of panic and fear, they struggled with her, trying to overpower her as she fought back. The confrontation turned chaotic, filled with desperate cries for help that echoed into the night. In the heat of the moment, Clara's resistance grew stronger, igniting a primal urge within Andrew and Isabelle to protect themselves at all costs. In the end, Clara was brutally killed in what they attempted to stage as an accident. They dragged her body to the edge of the riverbank, arranging it to appear as though she had fallen into the water while trying to escape. Andrew's heart pounded as they concocted a story of self-defense, hoping to convince themselves and anyone who might question the circumstances of her death. As they drove back to the church, their minds raced with fear and guilt, but they convinced themselves that they had done what was necessary to save their lives. The tragic outcome of that night would haunt them forever, their lives forever altered by the choices they made in a moment of desperation. Little did they know, their secrets would soon unravel, bringing them face to face with the consequences of their actions. In the days following Clara Greene's tragic death, the small community that once revered Father Andrew and his wife began to grapple with an unsettling reality. Initially, the incident was described as a terrible accident, but as friends and family mourned, doubts began to surface. Clara's closest friends gathered in disbelief, recalling her vibrant spirit and the plans they had made together. They found it hard to accept that someone so full of life could simply die in such a way. As the local authorities began their investigation, detectives noticed several inconsistencies in the accounts provided by Andrew and Isabelle. Their stories, while seemingly innocent at first, began to unravel under scrutiny. Clara's friends recounted overhearing heated arguments between Andrew and Clara in the days leading up to her death, sparking further suspicion. Detectives interviewed witnesses and gathered information from Clara's social media accounts and text messages. They discovered that Clara had recently sent a series of texts to a close friend expressing her concern about Andrew's behavior, hinting that something was amiss in her marriage. These messages contrasted sharply with Andrew's claims that everything had been fine before the tragedy. As investigators delved deeper, they uncovered incriminating evidence. A thorough search of Andrew and Isabelle's belongings revealed hidden text messages between the two, filled with explicit declarations of love and plans to meet in secret. Additionally, forensic teams found fingerprints on a broken object at the scene, an item that Andrew claimed was part of a tragic accident but was connected to a heated confrontation. Witness accounts began to paint a clearer picture of the events leading up to Clara's death. Neighbors reported hearing raised voices on the night she died, and one even claimed to have seen Isabelle leave the Greene residence shortly before the incident occurred. This information, combined with the physical evidence, painted a troubling picture for investigators. Feeling the mounting pressure, Isabelle eventually broke down during questioning, confessing to the affair with Andrew, but insisting that Clara's death was an accident. However, The detectives were not convinced. Timeline of events did not align with her claims, and the evidence suggested something far more sinister. As the truth began to surface, the community was rocked by the revelations of Andrew's betrayal and the involvement of his sister-in-law. The local media picked up the story, splashing headlines across newspapers and news channels, framing Andrew not as a man of God, but as a murderer who had destroyed his family. Parishioners, who once flocked to the church, were now filled with anger and disbelief, grappling with the notion that their beloved priest could be capable of such heinous acts. Vigils were held in Clara's memory, with community members gathering to mourn her loss and celebrate her life. The public outcry against Andrew and Isabelle grew louder, with calls for justice echoing through the town. As the investigation progressed, the once respected figures were now subjects of scorn, leaving their reputations shattered. The community's faith in Andrew was irrevocably broken, and as the legal proceedings began, all eyes were on the courtroom. The tragic tale of love, betrayal, and murder unfolded before them, leaving a lasting impact on the community that would not easily be forgotten. Clara's death had revealed dark secrets, exposing the fragility of trust and the devastating consequences of a forbidden affair. The trial of Father Andrew Greene and Isabelle Clark began with the community in shock, grappling with the shocking betrayal and the violent end to Clara Greene's life. As the evidence unfolded in the courtroom, it painted a harrowing picture of deception and desperation. Prosecutors presented text messages between Andrew and Isabelle, detailing their affair and the conversations leading up to Clara's tragic death. Witnesses testified about the emotional turmoil Clara had faced, the signs of distress she had shown before her untimely demise. The brutal nature of Clara's murder weighed heavily on the jury. Andrew and Isabelle's actions, fueled by their forbidden love and the desperate desire to hide their secret, were met with outrage and disbelief. After days of testimony, the jury reached a verdict. Both Andrew and Isabelle were found guilty of murder and conspiracy. The judge, understanding the gravity of their crime, handed down a harsh sentence, life in prison, without the possibility of parole. The courtroom erupted in a mixture of gasps and murmurs, as community members struggled to reconcile the kind priest they once admired with the man convicted of such a heinous act. In the days that followed, the reverberations of the trial echoed throughout the small town. The church, once a sanctuary of hope and faith, faced a crisis of trust. Church leaders quickly disowned Andrew, stripping him of his priesthood and condemning his actions. St. Michael's Church became a shadow of its former self, filled with grief and disappointment. The community mourned Clara, who had been a beloved figure, known for her kindness and unwavering support of those in need. Vigils were held in her honor, and many parishioners struggled to understand how the very people they had trusted could commit such a betrayal. Clara's family was left shattered by the events. Her parents, devastated by the loss of their daughter, grappled with anger and heartbreak. Isabelle, who had once sought refuge in her sister's home, was now a pariah, facing the consequences of her choices. The familial bond that had brought them together was irrevocably broken, leaving behind only pain and regret. As the dust settled, the community reflected on the tragedy. Conversations filled with whispers of betrayal echoed in the streets and at the local cafe as people questioned the nature of love, trust, and morality. The story of Father Andrew and Isabelle became a cautionary tale, reminding everyone that forbidden love can lead to devastating consequences. The moral complexities of their choices lingered in the minds of many, how easily desire can overshadow duty, and how the quest for personal happiness can unravel the lives of others. The narrative ended on a somber note, illustrating the profound impact of their actions. The legacy of betrayal hung heavily over the community, a painful reminder of how quickly lives can change. For Andrew and Isabelle, the prison walls would be their new reality, marked by the choices they had made. Claire's absence would forever leave a void, a loss felt by all who knew her. The tragedy served as a stark reminder of the fragility of love and the darkness that can emerge when it is pursued recklessly, leaving everyone involved forever altered